Thank you for joining the Reading League Michigan tonight with Dr. Mark Shinn as he leads us in Reading Benchmark Assessment Revisited. And with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Mark Shinn.
Good evening, everybody. I'm on Central Time, and I think I have a needy dog. He keeps popping in here and wants to be. He can't jump up on my lap, otherwise he probably would be up here with me. Welcome, and let's establish some ground rules. Unless you're a physician or a lawyer, call me Mark. Okay. It's been sort of my tradition to try to be as, we're all in this business together. And I like to be as collegial as possible. I have probably the poorest self-concept of anybody on this webinar thing. So let's see if we can make this as informal as we can make it. I'm not going to be able to monitor if people have their hands up, but if people have something to say, let's just chat. Okay. I certainly have a bunch of slides because that's what I've kind of done for a living for like a really, really, really long time. This is what I have devoted my life to. I feel very fortunate when I say the people that I've been blessed to learn from in terms of my knowledge base. I'm not an originalist, but I have been fortunate to work with the best of the best of the best of the best of the best. And when I sit around and say who I've just had the opportunity to learn from. I mean, I can remember how many years ago when I'm walking across the street in Cambridge with Gene Chaul and Marilyn Adams, and I'm sitting there going like, Gene Chaul asks to hold my arm as we walk across the street. You know, she's about 5 feet tall, swears like a sailor, and says, Mark, can I hold your arm as we cross the street? And I'm going like, how did I get here? Okay. I am a poor kid from Minneapolis, and Gene Chaul is asking for my arm. Okay. And I've just run into people like that my whole life. Okay. And just been somehow in the place at this time when I've had the opportunity to do things. Okay. And try things and fail. Okay. And knock my head against the wall over and over and over again. And there's been somebody there to kind of guide me and teach me. Okay. And so I'm supposed to be retired. You know, I call it retreated because I still get up every morning and I still am part of what we call the Don Quixote Club. We are trying to move the dial to give all kids the opportunity to beat the odds. Because if it wasn't for Miss Giffen in first grade, I probably would not have graduated from high school. I probably would have ended up like my cousins, you know, not graduating from high school, maybe working for the railroad, not doing much in terms of my life. But I graduated from high school, I was the oddball in my family. I went to college. Geez, I got a job. I, moved out of Minnesota, which was totally weird. I've been different places and I've met really strange people in my life. So if I can share some of those things, some of those experiences, and yes, I've been to Michigan. I've been to the Upper Peninsula. I've been to the cabins that were built by prisoners. In the porcupine mounds, yeah, in the snow and gotten lost. So what can we do here? This is called benchmark assessment, and I got to tell you, the benchmark assessment I had a lot to do with. Because I kind of started this stuff in Minneapolis schools as an evolution out of developing local norms. This was a process that came because teachers wanted more information as we were sampling kids, developing local norms. We were taking some kids, a large sample actually, Minneapolis schools, and teachers wanted information on all their kids because it was so interesting. We were taking some of the kids, they wanted all the kids, and so we actually called this process sheep dipping, like when you would inoculate all the sheep, take them through a funnel and put chemicals on them. So that was not a very attractive name, and so we called it benchmarking. And you know what? Over the years, it has evolved into something that is far beyond what it was originally intended, okay? And we call it mission creep. And just one more thing has been added. Or while we're at it, why don't we, and it's been unintended confusion, lost in the data, who's driving the bus, and now we are at a process where we are probably spending more time and money than what we really need to do based on the science of assessment. We're doing more than we need to do, and it's costing us in terms of time, energy, and we're losing the brightest minds in our teaching force who are wondering, what the heck are we doing? And it's time that we stop and rethink and devote our energies, not only to the science, but to the practice. And if we can kind of liberate ourselves a little bit to get back to the major job at hand, which is devoting our time and energy to powerful, early, research-based interventions driven by data, okay, but not overwhelmed by data, okay? And that will be my theme. Okay, so let's see if I hit the right, that's not the right one. So I have to have a disclosure statement, okay? Everybody who presents has to have a disclosure statement. So I don't make any money, okay? I'm doing this one pro bono, because guess what? I don't, I'm retreated. I'm a soccer dad. I drive my kid I call myself Duber, by the way. I'm a dad who drives my kids around. So that's my major income source. But I used to work, for Pearson in helping them with, go back to their Ames Web product. I'll go through some other stuff that helped me along the way. Years ago, I helped Cambium with their VMath in terms of their progress monitoring system. Years ago, I helped McGraw-Hill with their Jamestown Reading Navigator, which was a pretty good adolescent intervention program. I helped them with their progress monitoring, and I got a little bit of royalties for that. It's, of course, no longer in existence. I still get a little bit of a stipend for the Consortium on Reaching Excellence, which is a national teacher, actually a professional development group out of California that works in a variety of professional learning activities around the country, mostly with low-income communities in terms of teacher development and other things. But other than that, I have no other conflict of interest. But I've seen it all. I just as a sort of a little bit of experience. I was in graduate school working with the development of curriculum-based measurement. Before it was called curriculum-based measurement, they were called simple measures. My dissertation opened up Pandora's box, as Stan Dino called it, because my dissertation was the first evidence that showed you could differentiate or identify kids with reading problems from typically developing or low achieving kids. The first evidence that these tools, when kids could read aloud, you could actually systematically differentiate kids at risk from other kids. Stan Dino said, people are going to get far more interested in that than progress monitoring. And he was right. Because screening is far more interested than progress monitoring. So I was in schools when we collected data and we organized screening data by hand. And we drew graphs by hand, okay, with 5,000 kids. If you can imagine, when we went to Iowa and helped the state of Iowa develop their problem-solving model, and we tested, we went to the State Department of Ed of Iowa, and we did field testing with people from all over the state of Iowa, and we had tested developing their norms as part of staff development. We tested like 3,000 kids in a day, okay? And to show people that you could collect information on kids' basic skills. This was like 1985, okay? I was there in terms of when the federal government wanted people trained, leadership people, because there was a shortage nationally. So the federal government gave me money to train doctoral people that could be disseminated. And we ended up training people to work in 31 states in doctoral programs, okay, to be able to do this stuff. I was fortunate. I worked to develop what became DIBELS, merging these early literacy measures that were kindergarten with curriculum-based measures. The first time where reading was combined with kindergarten measures, phonemic awareness and initial sound fluency, with oral reading to become what became the DIBELS that you see now today in 1998. And then we had a divorce, and and then ultimately became working with AIMSweb, okay, where I became the chief scientist before it was sold to Pearson, okay, and I served as a consultant to them till 2020. I published over 100 book chapters on curriculum-based measurement, database decision-making, edited 2 books on curriculum-based measurement, 3 books on research-based intervention with some of the top researchers in the world, where I learned a ton. And guess what? I worked in 45 states, including Michigan, anywhere from Dearborn to Saginaw to Muskegon to Tbilisi to Oakland to you name it, okay, with MTSS. Whether it had an impact or not, who the heck knows? But I've worked a bunch in Michigan over the years on MTSS implementation, and actually helped some of the things around guidance around SLD identification practices, trying to steer the state away from patterns of strengths and weaknesses, which is morally wrong, okay, as a practice for identifying kids. So I've seen it all and tried to do it all. Now, the net effect of that is today is I kind of look like this. Oop. I'm kind of grouchy about how things have evolved, okay? And that's my theme, because we've drifted away from this.
We can't hear the sound, Mark. Is there supposed to be sound with that, sir?
Oh, don't tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't hear it.
Oh
So
man, this
when
is
you
what I
share
hate about
screen, well, when
Zoom.
you share screen, you have to hit optimize with sound. I didn't even think to ask if you had if you stop sharing, you can stop and hit optimize with sound. I think that will help you. Then we'll hear the sound. Does anybody else know that for sure? Kirsten might know. I think that's what you have to do.
You don't have to stop sharing. You just hit the 3 dots at the bottom of the screen where it says more.
Okay, now what did I just do?
That's okay.
All right. Okay, share screen.
Yep.
Eh,
And then it says,
And
it'll say like share screen sound.
Okay, now share screen
Mm-hmm.
and then optimize for video clip, share sound. There we
Share
go.
sound.
Yep.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Got it.
Okay. Oh boy, panic because, sort of hearing things is pretty important. And now I got to go back and hope I didn't screw up my whole presentation. That's my handouts. I don't want to go there. And I hope. Okay,
There you are.
there we are.
Perfect.
When I say begin, start reading aloud at the top of the page. Read across the page. Try to read each word. If you come to a word that you don't know, I'll tell it to you. Be sure to do your best reading. Are there any questions?
No.
Okay, begin.
It's a pretty good competition. I felt probably knowing it was a best one at my school. After I'd read a few times, I was important to start reading it out loud. I followed the book's directions again. First, I read the competition out loud.
You get the point. When I have used this clip with teachers, I ask them to raise their hand when they've heard enough to tell me whether Billy is a pretty good reader, a reader that needs some help. What kind of reader is Billy? And almost always, most of the hands go up after about 15 seconds. This is a 1-minute clip, by the way. This is a standardized measure of reading that we have well over 250 refereed journal articles about. It's a measure called reading curriculum-based measurement, or oral reading fluency, which is actually a misnomer. It's a measure of general reading ability. It's a short oral reading test. If it were 10 minutes long, it would not be called an oral reading fluency test. It's a short oral reading test. I call it grandma's test because, you see, grandmas know how well, I'm not trying to be sexist, by the way, but grandmas know how well their grandkids read. They know that by listening to them. And it doesn't take very long to know how well a kid reads. You can do that with older people. You can do it with even really young kids. You can listen to a kindergarten kid and know how well a kid reads. And we've lost sight of this. It doesn't take an extreme diagnostic test to tell how well a kid reads and whether they need help. Okay? Now, we've known this for about 40 years. Okay? And we've drifted away to the idea that we need massive amounts of information to know whether a kid not only needs help, but what kind of help they need. The funny thing is the evidence suggests that that's not true. You don't need massive amounts of evidence to figure out who needs help, and you don't need massive amounts of evidence to figure out what kind of help they need. It's pretty weird. But we have developed a culture that is spending massive amounts of time on trying to identify who and trying to identify what. And it is distracting from the real mission, which is intensive, strong, powerful curriculum and instruction. So, as we look at this is overwhelming what people think benchmark is. I test a kid in the fall and I see this kid is discrepant. I test the kid in the winter. I test the kid in the spring. And this is benchmarking. Fall, winter, spring testing for the purposes of screening. And for a kid like Billy, this could happen for him in 4th grade fall, 4th grade winter, 4th grade spring, but worse. For a kid like Billy, this could have happened in kindergarten, fall, winter, spring, 1st grade, fall, winter, spring, 2nd grade, fall, winter, spring, 3rd grade, fall, winter, spring, 4th grade, fall, winter, spring, and it will happen 5th grade, fall, winter, spring, 6th grade, fall, winter, spring, maybe 7th grade, fall, winter, spring, maybe 8th grade, fall, winter, spring. And it wouldn't just happen with oral reading. It would happen with you name it, you name it, you name it. And it may not just happen in reading. It may happen in mathematics. It will not likely happen in spelling, which I find incredibly bizarre. And it will not likely happen in writing. When we all know that the language arts, those three things are so tightly wound together, those language arts, which were the three major curriculum-based measures that were developed in 1980 and validated by federal funds, that were the major progress monitoring tools that we began benchmarking in 1982, those are not the things that are frequently assessed. It's kind of weird.
What do you name those, Mark? Or are you talking about the test of the written expression?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of obviously a one-time reading measure, and then what would be the third?
Spelling curriculum-based measurement.
Okay.
Where words are dictated every 7 seconds for older kids, or every 10 seconds for younger kids, presuming that they've had any handwriting instruction, which has been a major absence in American schools, which Steve Graham and Karen Harris say is not only essential for written expression, but as reading experts will say, handwriting is an important component for reading because it helps to learn vowels, the curved letters, which is really weird when you think about it, but learning handwriting helps reading because it helps to discriminate the curved letters. Oh my goodness gracious.
I'm so shocked right now because I feel like I know a lot of things, and the fact that there's a spelling CBM, I don't know if I'm like calling myself out as naive, because I know the CBM for written expression, and what I would have loved to have my hands on. Every 7 seconds you give another word. Is there a grade span that runs across? Where does it start?
Oh, it's typically in grade 2.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Oh, thank you. That's just a gift right there. That's out there somewhere. So
the challenge is, of course, that, and again, a lot of this stuff is not driven by practice. It's driven by publishers. Okay, and that's the frustration. It's not driven by research. It's not driven by practice. And this is my, and having, the experience, that because it's part of being that part of that inside world where, it's interested in what sells, and it's not what's needed. It's what sells, and then it's the challenge.
What was the name of that spelling Every 7 seconds, what was the name of that measure?
It's a spelling curriculum-based measurement, or spelling CBM. Okay, and if you go back to if you go back to the original Ames web, there was a spelling SCBM measure. Okay, it may still be part of Ames Web Plus. It may. I don't know. It may be part of FastBridge. It may. What I do now is I keep my nose out of all the publishers, okay? Because it's just good to keep your nose out, okay? Because then, yeah. So as we think about this, is the common perception, right? And the challenge is all of practice now is all sort of devolved into not being planful. It's sort of like the telephone game. A district implements their benchmarking sort of by, I don't know why or how people choose to do it. Okay, it's sort of like what a publisher tells them to do, or what a data system tells them to do. It's not really driven by a best practice model. Okay, it's not driven by a scientific model. It's almost like, a consultant comes in and says, this is how you do it. Or by, this is how another district did it, so this is how you do it. Okay, and it's just, you don't see anybody taking a step back and doing less. You see always somebody doing something more. Never taking a step back and saying, like, well, why? And I want to give us the option to ask some questions, okay? And here's the irony, that benchmarking was designed first and foremost as a progress monitoring system for this thing called growth and development for all kids, like a wellness chart. Like you take your kid to the doctor once in a while and say, is my kid growing? And the primary tool was this oral reading, or ORF, or reading CBM, okay? And you'd say, is a kid like Billy, are they growing? And it would be all kids, okay? Is Sally growing? Is Jose growing? Are they becoming better readers, okay? And oh, by the way, does this kid need help? Screening was the secondary purpose, not the primary purpose. The primary purpose was growth and development. The secondary purpose was screening. And there was no intent for instructional planning, because you really can't plan instruction from short tests. Short tests are not diagnostic. They're not designed to help teachers plan instruction. Okay? So,
What happened? Are you going to tell us why that happened?
because
Shift.
teachers wanted more information. And so to be able to appeal to people gave them more information. Okay? Oh, and because guess what? People always, okay, so what do I do? Okay, this kid is not growing. What do I do? It's a logical question, right? And so if you want to appeal to people, you can't just say, well, you need to get that from your instruction, or you need to get that from your, your tests that come from your, oh, wait a minute, there are no tests that come with my curriculum. We're doing balanced literacy. We're making up our curriculum with teachers pay teachers. Oh, there are no placement tests. Oh, remember, I worked with a school that was on the state watch list, and teachers were developing their teachers with, teachers pay teachers and stuff like that. And there were no tests. And there so what do you do? So, yeah. So here's these big ideas. Benchmark has shifted to screening repeatedly, doing it over and over and over again with multiple measures, not just one, but multiple measures, multiple times, multiple years, adding diagnostic tests because what do I do if a kid needs help? Diagnostic information and inundating teachers with data. Can you imagine being like a second grade teacher? And by the way, when I was working with Chicago Public Schools, the average class size was 42 kids. Yeah, oh yeah, 42 kids. Can you imagine getting diagnostic data on 42 kids? Can you imagine getting diagnostic data on 20 kids? 20 individual profiles, and you're supposed to make sense out of that? Oh my goodness. And here's the deal, it's inconsistent with what we know. I mean, we've got people that are really smart, not me, really smart that study this stuff. And we'll just see a little bit of this stuff. And when you think about the time and money, are people still doing data days in Michigan?
Yeah.
Do you know where data days came from?
Mm-mm.
Data days came from our work in Iowa, where people were hand drawing graphs from putting data into Excel. Do you know how long that took?
Yeah.
Okay, so the tradition comes from pre-technology. Do you know how long it takes to identify your most needy kids in second grade?
About a minute.
Not very long. So all of this stuff about risk is pretty bizarre. Let's say you've got a school with, like 100 kindergarten kids. How many kids can you realistically provide intervention to? 25%, a quarter of those kids? That's the question I ask. What percent of kids can you realistically provide intensive intervention to? That's your cut score. Because if you identify more kids than you can provide intervention to, your interventions are weak. Your cut score has to align to your resources. Because if you don't, you provide weak interventions. You can't, well, and we can come to this about these what I call the dreaded triangles. The red, the yellow, the green. Do you know where those came from? Drinking. And I should know because I was there. Drinking in a motel room in La Jolla, California, 1998. We were in a motel drinking and we wanted to give teachers more information than just scores. So we thought, how about if we give them some notion about kids that needed more intervention than others? And so how about if we needed kids that needed a lot of intervention, the kids that needed a little intervention, the kids that were okay? And so how about if we, and this took on, it's appealing, took on a life of its own. And now it took over the world. And we can see how this becomes bizarre. So it's time to rethink. Time to do a little less testing and a lot more teaching. And that's what the data says. The data says it pretty clearly. Now, I'm not going to go through, there's a couple little publishers that just, these are excerpts. I've taken the names of the publishers out. And I'm not picking on them, okay, because this is what people do. But you can see the confusion. Universal screening or benchmark assessment, Benchmark refers to testing all kids 3 times a year to identify kids with reading difficulties. No, that's not entirely true. It is a good method to identify kids at risk, for sure. It is that, but it's more than that. But it is not exclusively testing kids 3 times a year. You don't need to screen kids 3 times a year. We'll see why. Another publisher, benchmarking and progress monitoring. No, benchmarking is part of progress monitoring. It's universal screening and universal progress monitoring. Oh my goodness. And yes, it does allow you to quickly identify kids at risk. But you don't need to do that for every kid all the darn time. It makes no sense. And here's the problem. Is a good reader likely to be at risk at the next benchmark? You know who knows that? A smart teacher. Smart teachers know that. And you know what they do? They shake their head. And you lose credibility with smart educators. You know, I've talked to so many smart teachers and they go like, God, I don't know why we're doing this. Now they go along with the system and yes, they learn some stuff, but they become cynical about data. Now, they don't tell you this because they're good people, but we don't want people cynical about data. And does a good reader ever become at risk? Not really. Not unless something bad happens to them. Now, you can always think of an exception, but generally speaking, now, should a teacher in a good system ever plan individual instruction for every single kid? Every single kid? Multiple times in a year? Oh, and by the way, should they be planning individual instruction at the end of the year? What's that about? They're getting a diagnostic profile in the spring? Diagnostic information, and that's weird. That makes no sense. So here's the science, gang. And this is from Amanda Vanderheyden, who's done some of the best work here. The ubiquitous practice of giving more than one screening measure doesn't help a darn thing. Now, she didn't say one system. She said more than one measure. It doesn't help a darn thing in terms of identifying kids at risk. The data are clear. It doesn't help. So why do you do it? So Marilyn Adams, how many years ago said, if you want to identify an at-risk kid at the beginning of kindergarten, what do? Name the letters of the alphabet. Oh. Do you know a lot of kids don't know the names of the alphabet at the beginning of the year? Did you know a lot of kids are at risk for not learning to read before they've been taught how to read? Well, duh. So what do you think Jack Fletcher says the first thing you do for kids coming into school is? Teach first, test if you need to. Your first screen in kindergarten is good instruction, because a lot of kids, when you look at the base rate, a lot of kids walking in the door can't do a lot of stuff. And here's the irony. I'm really big on dyslexia screening, but you can spend a whole lot of time and money and you're going to find a whole lot of kids. And what are you going to do with that information? The net effect is you're going to provide a whole lot of teaching. So if you know the net effect is you're going to provide a whole lot of teaching, why didn't you provide a whole lot of teaching? For all of this unfunded mandate, which is what is happening in a lot of states, we're not putting the time and energy into providing that whole lot of teaching while we're searching for this magic bullet as to what is the method or the methods for a dyslexia screening. And by the way, there's nothing unique about dyslexia screening from finding kids that are at risk for reading. Now you can drill deeper, find deeper, rapid automatized naming, da 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 da. And what are you going to find? A whole bunch of kids at risk for reading who have not been taught how to read.
Can
So
can you help
Go ahead.
clarify? Can you help clarify prevention versus remediation? Because I think one of the pieces is previous to attending to the data, there was a lulled sense or a dull sense that students will eventually catch up. There's the wait and see approach, and what you and I might determine to be strong and good instruction was not even sort of happening. So where does that fit in when we think about remediation versus prevention? The whole analogy of an ambulance, or a gate versus an ambulance. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, it's not, what we would think about now, okay, is not the old status quo agricultural kindergarten instruction. You know, just provide them a little water and food and let them grow. Okay, that's not what people are talking about. We're talking about, and you'll see, it is really clear what a lot of kids and even typically developing kids benefit from is a strong, explicit, rich oral language. Okay, it's not phonics. Okay, it's a rich, explicit oral language plus explicit phonics. Okay, without that explicit, rich oral language component, okay, people have ignored that. Okay, well, at least too many people have ignored that. So it's meeting them at the door with that rich program. Okay, and it's typically not a teacher kind of made stuff. Okay, and it's not kind of letting them come in and wait a while, you know, and let them get you. It's like meeting them at the door with that stuff, and it's not boring. It's cool. It's fun, and it's well known, and it's field tested.
I would like, but my question still comes back. You're exactly right on that. And now we're talking about the high quality instructional materials that teachers aren't just ripping off
Yeah.
of GPT. That's
Yeah.
evidence to line. But I think one of the things that has allowed us to really move the needle in that direction and push back is the fact that we do have the screening data and we can say, look, this is where kids are and we need to get serious. You can't just
Sure.
feed and water them. So how does that fit in with
Yeah, your benchmark data nobody's saying don't collect like your at-risk
Yep.
data. Okay.
got it?
Like, look, I can sit down and say, look, I got 65% of my kids don't know their letter names.
Yeah.
I got, and here's the deal. Anybody can always do more than what I might suggest. Okay. That's a choice that people make. I don't want to tell people do what Mark says, do the bare bone minimum, but I want to give people the luxury of saying we can do less. We don't have to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, look, what about phonemic awareness? Okay, should we do that on every kid? Well, if I did it, I would do it for more than a minute. The phonemic segmentation test, I don't think is sufficient reliable at 1 minute. Okay, I don't, I helped develop that. I changed the standardized instruction from it was a rolling dictation test, where you would stop the watch and start the watch, stop the watch, start the watch, stop the watch, start the watch. Instead, I got the directions changed, got rolling good to change it from that start the watch, stop, which was incredibly difficult for people to collect the data. Instead, got it to be a fixed time. I advocated for a longer time, but I couldn't get Roland to make it a longer test. He fell in love with a minute.
I
Which
agree
is
with you on
stupid.
that. My colleagues across our county say it's the most difficult test, and I don't know that it's necessarily all that reliable in that short amount of time. So in my
Right.
schools, I ask that you at least have only one proctor. So at least the consistency
Right.
or 1 or 2 proctors, because it is so difficult to give. So
That's right. And
yeah,
and so this is where some things trump science.
Yeah.
Some people fell in love with a minute when all of the original research, okay, on curriculum-based measurement was dictated not by how 1 minute, it was dictated by how long it took to collect a reliable sample of data. Okay, like oral reading was determined by testing 10 minutes versus 7 minutes versus 5 minutes versus 3 minutes versus 1 minute versus 30 seconds. Which one worked best? They all worked. So the most logistically feasible was 1 minute. Teachers actually hated 30 seconds. The timing was just like, I don't like that. And so if they all worked the same, 1 minute was chosen. Spelling was actually 2 minutes, okay, because that was the best, that was the most shortest, that was the most reliable. Math was actually longer because it took longer to get a reliable sample. The early Dibbles measures were, I would argue, falling in love with a minute and were not tested the same way. Okay, and that's where we got into fights. So, and that's why I think phonemic segmentation has had potential, but I think that measure should have been longer because of, I think, the concerns that you had. It's hard, okay, and I think kids take a while for them to get it. That's me.
and it's
But going
also
back to
difficult for that adult to process it too. They just heard a sound, and that's why one proctor they know what's coming up, all oil. They
exactly,
know what's coming. So thank you
and
for
that means it's less reliable. And so a longer test would, and I don't have evidence for this, but my hypothesis is a longer test would be more reliable. But getting back to the science, and this is not just, Amanda Vanderheyden. This is Amanda Vanderheyden, Matt Burns, and others, okay, going back and looking at multiple tests, multiple data, okay, and other people, including Jack Fletcher, Barbara Foreman, okay, they're all looking at this stuff. And they're all trying to figure out, do you need all this data? Do you need all this data? And the basic thing is no. Okay, what you need is, because as Jack Fletcher says, especially with young kids, you got a lot of kids that are all jammed up in a non-normal distribution. They're all jammed up with very few skills. And so to be able to differentiate them, you need variability, okay? You need variability, and you get variability to be able to spread the kids out. It takes teaching, okay? Where some kids pick it up and some kids don't, okay? So the big deal, and the way I put these asterisks in there, is you can't really test the kids to figure out who the kids are, especially at the beginning, and you can't test the kids to figure out what to teach them. Okay, that comes from the curriculum. It comes from the, and if you don't have a curriculum, you're in a mess. Okay, because you don't have the diagnostic tests to be able to figure out what a kid might be lacking if they're having difficulty. Okay, the diagnostic tests that come with the screeners are too short. They're just too short. And if you have an adaptive test, okay, like some of the 45-minute tests, they're 45 minutes long. And you know, and they're not tied to a curriculum unless you're using that as a curriculum, you know, and we know which those curriculum and test packages are. And I worry about them. Okay, where you one-stop shopping, get your curriculum and your assessment, and no teacher required. You know, I'm not enthusiastic about those. So let's just talk about the screening part. Here's my takeaway. We have a lot of schools that are collecting data as part of benchmark, and there's no intervention. So my takeaway, I've used this phrase for about 20 years, don't screen if you don't intervene. So why are you doing benchmarking in math? Do you have an intervention program for math? Well, no, but we like the data anyhow. Why? What are you doing? Well, teachers love the data. Well, what do they? Well, it's part of the data we collect. Well, I don't get it. Well, we're paying for it, so we might as well. Okay, well, it's your time anyhow. I don't get it. My second point. Oh, ooh, what happened there? I got slow things. My computer's acting slow. Come on. Wow. It's not happening. Jeez. Come on, takeaway. Okay. Well, something's weird. My second point is this. Don't screen unless you're committed to progress monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to do this. What are you doing for progress monitoring if you have tier 2? Well, we're not really doing progress monitoring. Well, then why are you doing screening?
Right.
Okay. What are you doing for progress monitoring at tier 3? Oh, well, we're not really doing any progress. Well, we don't have a system. And here's my favorite. So what do your IEPs look like? Do your IEPs all start with blah, blah, blah and end up with 80%? Well, yeah. Well, then you got really big problems to solve because, you know, I'm a special educator too. And I'm sort of really big on disability rights. And if your special ed system isn't special, and you're really committed to things like MTSS and early intervention, but you've left special ed alone, I'm upset. Point number 3, less is more. And if you're not really committed to getting really good at oral reading as your primary tool in your toolbox, like, you know, this phrase that's been going around, which is do less than obsess. Like, do less than obsess. Get really good at knowing what good reading is and the components of good reading. Like, get really good at systematic assessment of oral reading. And it's not just the number of words read correctly. Like, we should be attuned to things like prosody. We should be really good at comprehension self-monitoring. Fancy word for whether a kid self-corrects. We should be really good at listening for whether a kid has a strategy, an effective strategy for words they don't know. Because kids pretty much have a strategy. It's whether it's an effective strategy. Okay? And so I want us to get really good at a few important assessment skills before we go off and do everything. I want us to start focusing on using our screening data best at the end of the year. What? The best time to be using our screening data is at the end of the year. Ooh, that's really weird. I worked with a bunch of principals in North Dakota, and we started focusing on using our end of the year data. So every teacher knew which kids were in what intervention before the first day of school. And the principal said, you know, if we started thinking this way, we could actually plan. It's like, well, yeah. And we'll see, there's a couple slides on that. And I want us to be clear about our cut scores. How are you deciding who gets intervention? Are you relying on somebody else's cut scores? Who decides who's in the red and who's in the yellow? Are you relying on, let's see, the cut scores coming from whatever publisher is tied to the 40th percentile on Pearson's grade, which is not even the publisher of this particular test. It's the 40th percentile on Pearson's grade in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, but in 6th grade, and we're using the receiver characteristic curve. Does anybody know what a receiver characteristic curve is? Or logistic regression? Does anybody know what this stuff is? Oh, and by the way, that's different than this data system, which uses, and Dibble's 8, or the Oregon Dibbles, uses different than Acadians, even though they were related at one time, and they disagree about this system, and which one's right? Or are they all wrong? So I talk about beware the triangles. What percent of kids do the triangles identify in your school? Do they align with the needs of your kids? Do you under or over identify based on the needs of your kids? Interesting thing. And then what's your screening plan across grades? Do you screen the same way in grade 5 as you do in grade 2? Do you screen in grade 8 the same way as you do in grade 5? Do you screen in 9th grade? Do you have a unified school district and have a screening plan at all? Because if you're doing MTSS, you should have a written document that says what you screen at kindergarten, when you screen, what you use, what you do at grade 3, and your plan should reflect these ideas, that as the grades go on, you screen with fewer tests and you screen less often. It's called you winnow your screening down, because by the time kids are older, you should have found almost all the kids, shouldn't you? When does your benchmarking end? If you're in a middle class, typically achieving community, and you're benchmarking after grade 5 or grade 6, you better have a pretty good reason. What's your reason? I was working with a school for the State Department of Ed in Utah a few years ago, and I raised this question, and somebody in the audience said, "Well, we benchmark through 10th grade." I said, "Whoa! What in the world are you benchmarking your kids in 10th grade for?" And they said, "Well, we are a high-need school district where about 75% of our kids in 10th grade fail to meet a basic skills standard of grade 7. Our kids are still growing. And I said, gotcha. They had a clear reason why they still needed to monitor the growth and development of their 10th graders. They were smart. They had a reason. They weren't just doing it because this is the way we were told to do it. Wow, they were smart. But most of the districts I still have a chance to work with, they just do it this way because this is the way the grade before them did it. It's just kind of like tradition, instead of having a carefully thought out plan. Now, I got a whole bunch of stuff. It's like we're going to go till 7:30, and I got a bunch more slides, and I'm going to shut up. Because you can see the slides, you can see the measures, you can see a little kid. We can now start detecting oral reading in mid-kindergarten. Okay? Mid-kindergarten. But what you need are highly decodable passages. Okay? Things that are related to kids learning phonics. Okay? You can't have a whole bunch of irregular words. You need words that are structured, that are, 75% highly or wholly decodable words. And I got a little video in here where, you by the end of the year, I've been working with these passages now for about 10 years, and you'll get kids, and what's really cool is you'll start to detect the qualitative features of kids reading. So they'll start reading with expression. They'll start engaging in some self-correction. You'll hear the nuances of good readers. Kids will typically be reading 25 words, 30 words at the end of kindergarten on wholly decodable passages that have had any reasonably decent kindergarten early reading instruction. It's really neat to be able, and you'll start to detect it around February or March. You'll start getting 5 to 10 words a minute correct. There's some discontinue rules that if they read less than 5 words correct in the first line, you stop, but you'll start to hear it. And that's really important for teachers and for kids to actually do that. So there's a bunch of stuff in there, but I've been talking too much and not doing very much listening. So I'm going to shut up and you guys talk. Please. I'm going to feel really bad.
I'm not going to be shy because as long as we have you, and then I'll turn it over to someone else. I really am interested in one of the comments you started out with, and I wrote it down and circled it for a question. So I don't know if this takes us too far back and you can tell me to pause. I was interested in this statement, the patterns of strength and weaknesses being morally wrong.
Oh, yeah. So well, here's what we know. Let's go back to the ability achievement discrepancy model, okay, for SLD. Okay, that's psychometrically wrong. Okay, for many reasons. Okay, first, it's based on what's called milk and jug theory, that kids have some kind of fixed innate capacity, and that it sets a fixed rate or fixed level of learning, and you'll never do better than that. Okay, your achievement can never be better. Here's your ability. Your achievement can never be better, and that's just totally wrong. Okay, it's wrong. I mean, if you look at the basic the data that you obtain, the typical achievement level for a kid with a cognitive ability score of 70 their achievement is expected achievement is actually about 80. Okay, 1 in 4 kids with cognitive ability scores below 70 would be expected to be reading in the low average range. Okay, which is totally blows people out of their brains if they have this false belief of what's called milk and jug. So, okay, so that's a problem. When you take patterns of strengths and weaknesses, it takes all of the problems of the ability achievement discrepancy model and multiplies them by 100-fold. Okay, it takes all of these potential. There are 145 potential strengths and weaknesses in the one single cognitive test with 10 subtests. There are 145 potential strengths and weaknesses. There are at least, if you have a 90% true rate, okay, 10% error rate, you're going to get 15 potential weaknesses by chance. Okay, and it gets worse from there. It's all based on what's called the problems of highly correlated subtest scores. And there's 4 or 5 different ways of doing patterns of strengths and weaknesses. They don't agree. There's no validation that they identify the same kids. The base rates are incredibly different. Yeah, there's just no substance to them.
What's the answer then?
They're wrong.
And
There's and again, if you go back to the work of Jack Fletcher, who's done the major work on this, if you read the major document that he wrote for the Texas Department of Ed on guidelines for SLD identification, I'd be more than glad to send you a copy of it. The evidence is clear that it does not hold it. When I say it, the models they use do not have any scientific integrity. They're just wrong, and they're bad for kids. They're just bad for kids. Yep. Yeah, they're bad. Besides being time consuming. By the way, they also put, they're also, I would argue, in violation of the IDEA because they put the power for decision making solely in the hands of school psychologists, and they put the method of identification on a single method and a single person. Oh, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be the case. It's not supposed to be a single method. It's supposed to be based on multiple pieces of data, not a single method, and it's not supposed to be based on a single person. Because basically the school psychologist controls the flow. Nobody else can interpret the data. Nobody else can collect the data. I'm a school psychologist. So.
oh my.
Yeah. I'm sounding like I don't like anything. I'm sounding like that kid on a commercial, Mikey. He doesn't like anything. But I do like really good reading instruction. And I do like simple, authentic assessment. Come on, some of you other guys, I hope I haven't totally bored you out of your skull and discouraged you or something. Or I'm supposed to be empowering you and exciting you.
Well, I am one of the board members of Reading League PA, and I learned about tonight from the amazing Amy Sell. And we were having this conversation at a dyslexia awareness event about how we just didn't feel like the ORF in first grade, because of its lack of controlled and decodability, was a valid measure. And then she introduced me to your work, and I just feel like I fell down a rabbit hole, and you gave me so much to ponder. So I really thank you. And I'm excited to learn more from you.
Yeah, you can't. The challenge is uncontrolled narrative text. okay, with young readers. Okay, you know, and that's been a problem for a really long time. That's why many of the commercial, even in the early CBM stuff, we didn't have first graders read until mid first grade. Okay, for many years, we did not have first graders read in the fall because the passages that were developed were too difficult for first graders to read. You know, the median score was like 5 words correct. They couldn't read them. They were basically a collection of irregular words. I mean, if you looked at a first grade basal reader, you know.
Mark, let's not gloss over the work that you've recently done, though. I think that
Oh,
maybe
no,
if people
no.
don't already know that, they don't know that.
Right.
So let's not
Right.
miss the work that you have done. So this
Right.
is a nice segue
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there's two things. And one is, you know, for working, starting to write passages, and you that are wholly or highly decodable. We started with having a kindergarten and a former first grade teacher write a bunch of passages, and then we ran them through a program that was used called Phonics Finder, and that would screen them, and it would actually analyze them for the percentage of highly or wholly decodable words. Now, you know, people will debate what is a decodable word, because ultimately all words are decodable, but there's a set of rules that apply, and then we would actually modify words to make the passages more decodable, so they were at least 75% wholly or highly decodable. And of course, you have kids field test and read them, okay, to be able to make sure, because the real test of readability is not formula, it's actually having kids read them, okay? So we actually had hundreds of kids read them, okay, to be able to make sure that, you know, what number of words can kids read, what is their accuracy, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. And guess what? How reliable are they? And how do they correlate with other reading measures? And yeah, the reliability and validity came out really, really, really well, you know. And guess what? Kids can actually read them. That's, you know, there's one of the things is actually seeing this little girl. We didn't have a chance to see it, but she's got a really quiet little voice, and it's February of kindergarten, and she's reading, and it's like, it's so cool. One of the things we've been trying to encourage is schools to start incorporating video and with either cell phones, and actually developing literacy portfolios as part of their benchmark. You know, take a little video sample when you're benchmarking and build that into PowerPoints, so kids can, and parents and teachers can actually see the journey, not only see but hear how kids are improving over their career in school. You know, it's fine. The kids will see themselves in a soccer game, in a choir, play hockey, ballet, but they don't see or hear themselves read. And at conference time, teachers don't typically show or kids reading. They'll share graphs and data, but they won't show performance of kids reading, especially with really young kids. And I just find that fascinating with today's technology. Really young
such a
kids.
fabulous idea. Sorry to interrupt, but oh my gosh, I want to give you just a round of applause on just that alone. Right.
Oh, I've got, you know, I developed a little PowerPoint, you know, where you've got the first slide is, you know, my literacy portfolio and a picture of the kid's school. And, you know, the next PowerPoint slide is a little place where you put in you just paste in the video, and you paste in a copy of what the kid read, and then you paste in a copy of the kid's benchmark, a progress graph, and then a little place where the teacher can put in the little narrative, and then you just build a slide each time you do a benchmark.
That's
And here's my first grade, and here's my second grade. And, like you'd never, and kids never see themselves read either.
Mhm. Is that template on your, I want to get a plug because Amy did drop it in the chat, but you have a website and your resources can be found there. And
Yeah, I didn't,
yeah, you didn't put
I
that
haven't,
here, and I gave you a platform, sir. So I do want to make sure that we highlight the work that
yeah,
you're doing tonight.
yeah, I haven't,
Is that template on your website?
no, I haven't dropped all my data, all my stuff that I had is public, sort of public, which I had on my old website. I haven't transferred all it over for like downloads, which I had all my things on intervention articles and assessment articles. I haven't gotten all that stuff for downloads yet. It's all in my Dropbox, which I have a little bit of a link there, but not to my website yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have just a few more minutes of our time with Mark, so please do ask him questions, and please do make sure that you visit markshinn.org and check out what he does have available for you, because that's why I reached out to him when when I saw that he had that the work that he'd been doing. I got really bold one night and I said, I'm sending him an email and here we are tonight. So please do take this time, ask him some more questions before our time is up.
And before the time is up, just one more thing, and this is something that I always do, and I hardly ever get anybody taking me up on it, which means that I think that I really turn people off. But I always offer, whenever I do something, that I make an offer that for a pro bono follow up if anybody is ever interested. So, and I call it let things digest. Okay, like let people think about some of the things that I've said, and mull things over and think about them, discuss them with your colleagues, and if there's interest at another time or place, hopefully within a shorter period of time than like 2 years, to be able to sit down and say, hey, okay, let's have a follow up. And it doesn't have to be the same people. It can be some of the same people. You can open up to anybody else and say, let's follow up and have a discussion. Because we were thinking about some of the things. We didn't get to some of the slides. This one was really interesting, or we really don't understand this one because it's confusing. And that's an offer I will always make, Rebecca. So
Well, I'm going to tell you, Michigan's already up for it, and I think Pennsylvania might want to join us.
I don't care.
PA and Michigan are up for you. We'll definitely be back for a follow-up date, because there's a lot to process here. And I do want to see the slides that we didn't quite get to and give everyone an opportunity to visit your site and take a look. So my colleagues, Amy, Jody, and I, we will, and Kirsten and friends, we will definitely reach back out. I think Mary Kane had a question for you.
Yes, I was going back to something you said early on, and hopefully I can use the correct words. You were talking about how many kids within, like out of 100 that would need intervention. And I think you mentioned the number 25, and if that was too many, that perhaps there was something wrong with the intervention. And I was really sure that you were going to say perhaps there was something wrong with tier 1 instruction. So you didn't say that. It surprised me. So I just wanted some more information on that.
Yeah, so I have always believed that the most, when I work with an MTSS approach, when people are talking about planning, because I like proactive design, okay? The question I will ask is, okay, as you're thinking about intervention, how many kids do you think you can actually support in intervention? Okay, because you can't, if I don't want you to outstrip your resources. And so let's just start with discussion. And if you want, I'll Rebecca, you can ask for it. I've got a sample plan that I wrote for a school in Alexandria, I shouldn't say, in Virginia, okay? Because I did an analysis of how many, because here's my design plan. I would prefer not to have general ed teachers deliver tiered intervention. I would like to have general ed teachers focus on delivering the core with intensity and passion. Okay, tier 1. That's what I'd love to be able to have. Okay, I would prefer not to have, and this is my bias. Okay, I would really like to not have your general ed teachers not deliver tier 2 or tier 3. Okay, that's me. I would much rather have other people, because here's I believe MTSS is a system of supports, not just for kids, but supports for teachers. Oh, nobody's ever thought of that before.
Oh, Mark.
See,
I have to
MTSS
tell
is
you, Amy and I just had that conversation today too,
Yeah.
literally with Sarah Lowball.
yeah,
And-
that's what I want to pitch it as, a system of supports, not just for kids, but for teachers. Because I want teachers to see that this is something for them too. See, what if I've got Title I teachers? Shouldn't they be good candidates for delivering tier 2? Now, I've seen schools that have Title I teachers and they don't participate in MTSS. Believe me, Jody, seriously, Chicago, as a consultant, they wouldn't get. I've seen English learner teachers don't participate in MTSS. I've seen reading specialists don't participate in MTSS. I've seen reading paraprofessionals don't participate in MTSS. What? And they build MTSS solely on the backs of general ed teachers. And the general ed teachers feel like it's more work. Well, duh, because it is.
Yeah, that's just
And I would
bonkers.
prefer not to do that.
Can I
So
ask
I
you
will
about the
take-
walk to read model then? If you're talking about models, what do you think about that flooding and all this adult support goes to that grade level?
You could, if that's how you choose to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's how you choose to use the resources.
Okay.
It's not for me to tell you how to do that. Okay. As a consultant says, how do you choose to do it? Because that could allow you to serve more kids. Okay. But I will start with, how do you choose to see how many kids you think you can support? Okay. Because I want to start, because that will allow you to identify how many kids you want to identify. And I will just throw out, can you provide additional intervention to just say a quarter of your kids? Because if you can't, then you have to say, well, can you provide support for 20%? Because then your screening will identify your 20% most needy kids. Now, there will always be a kid above the line, a kid below the line, 2 kids above the line. That will always be the case. But instead of using the triangles solely, because I will never throw away that information, I will sit down and say, who are my most needy kids? Okay, and those will be my cut scores. Now, and those, that's pretty easy. What am I most, and teacher information, because I'm not going to get solely driven by numbers, but it's pretty easy to identify the most needy kids. Now, if I can identify more, great. I'm also a big fan, by the way, of a 2-tier model at K and 1. I mean, really, we got a kid who really can't read and a kid who really can't read. Can we make it more simple? At least kindergarten, good grief. Okay, and I would actually think at K1 and maybe 2. We don't have to get wedded to 3. So, the way that we can become more flexible, okay, and make it more simple. So we can sit down and say, by the way, what's our tier 2 intervention? Are we a big fan of SIPs that is our tier 2 intervention at kindergarten? SIPs is a pretty good program. Or are we using the direct instruction, EC, whatever, the early, that's a pretty good, I'm blanking out here at this time. It's a, really good direct instruction, kindergarten, program that's really good? Are we doing something with building a combination of language for learning plus blah, 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 or, reading master's signature edition, or, what are we thinking here? There's a couple other ones that are just really good, and it's not really my area, but I have really good people that I rely on for their advice for a good combination of instructional programs that are just knock your socks off. But I'm a big fan of who are we going to serve, then what are the good programs that align to meet the needs of the kids, and let's get really good at delivering them. Not like 7 different programs, but let's find the kids, let's find a good program and get really good at it. Let's look at our data and see what happens. Strong language, explicit language component, okay? Good systematic phonics. Phonics, make sure we get, a good program that is not just phonics, but is a comprehensive program. I'm not a big fan of, combination programs of a piece of this and a piece of that and a piece of this and a piece of that. Don't like station programs, or we rotate and go here and yeah.
Well, with that, it is 2 minutes past 8:30. So I want to thank you for the luxury of the time with you. And this was amazing. And we will be taking you up on another round 2 with Mark Shinn and Pennsylvania. Are you on board? Interested?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I go to Patton on November 1st or 2nd. I'm doing the Patton conference in Hershey, Pennsylvania, on secondary MTSS. So I will be enjoying. Patton is just an unbelievable, at least my bias is, I think they have the strongest, Pennsylvania has the strongest professional development support, I think, in the country. So I'm biased about Patton.
So are we, but we'll pass that along to Pam Kastner for you.
Oh yeah, Pam.
And we'll be there in Hershey. So
yeah, Dr. Collins, and oh my goodness, they're just some amazing continuity, unbelievable people. Yeah, I wish every state had that support. Yeah, especially like our state.
With that, thank you very much. And
well, thanks for the opportunity, Rebecca. I really really enjoyed this, and I hope it made some sense. The slides, there's plenty more there. You'll see a plan, at least a plan for phasing, reducing screening as you go through, reducing benchmark, the individual screening as kids get older and junk like that. So, hi, Amy. Finally came on the screen down there. So
really quick, where do we get the slides? I was a little late. I had a Halloween parade.
Let me.
Oh, yeah.
I think I missed it. They were probably dropped in the slide, and I got here late.
Yep.
Yeah, they're not full color, but and I also, should anybody want, these are Keynote. I do them in Keynote. If anybody wants the color version, I don't mind sharing the presentation. So I'm not wedded. I don't copyright anything for any particular reason. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and have a good evening. And there are some links in the chat. So before you leave, if there were some links that you wanted, folks, make sure that you pop on those so you have them in your tabs. Again,
yeah, my email's there too. If anybody wants to follow up, individual stuff too, you can just email, and I don't mind individual phone calls or chats too. I got nothing else to do.
You got to doober around.